Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of Stretching Your Vocals. Today's guest is Brian Matt. If you're wondering what this is, it's essentially an interview show where each episode I'll bring on a different guest voice actor and just shoot the shit and chat with them. In this episode, you're going to get lots and lots of lovely little growing pains because, mate, I'm a dingus, including but not limited to scribbling pen noises, noise cutting out because I didn't think in advance that maybe, just maybe, I should two-end record this. I even knocked the mic over at one point. We just won't acknowledge that. If you want an answer as to why these things happened, it's because I have low IQ. I'm the big stupid. I'm a dingus. Regardless of these issues, I think you should stick around, check it out, because, frankly, Brian is super interesting, his stories are amazing, and you can ignore me. Just listen to Brian, that's what matters. Final note before we get started, if you're wondering why I sound so low energy during the interview, that is because we started at midnight my time, and I had already only had 3 hours of sleep, so I was well and truly cooked, mate. Without further ado, let's get to the talking.
You're in Australia?
Yeah, I am, yes.
Which city in Australia are you in?
I live about an hour south of Perth in Western Australia.
Okay. I lived in Australia, actually before I lived in Japan for 1 year.
Really?
Back, I think around 8 or 9 times afterwards. And so, yeah, I only basically from Adelaide up to Darwin, and then I've seen everything in between there, and then Ayers Rock, but I never got over to Perth. It was like a 5-hour flight from Sydney, and there was just didn't seem to be the time. And I was kind of going after work at that time. I was going just in just going north, and there was all these great islands, and going starting from actually from the Blue Mountains up was simply amazing. So yeah, it's a beautiful country, that's for sure.
Yeah, I had no idea you'd been over this way. That's amazing.
Yeah, I went over with the Canadian government. I was still a student at the time at university, and I was I only had 1 year done, and they just said, go on over. And I had some Japanese ability at that time. So I was very interested in the Foreign Service at first. And so for the first overseas as a student, they put me in Sydney, and I lived in Crow's Nest in North Sydney for 1 year. And then after that, I took 3 months and just went up the East Coast. Like I said, all the way up to Cairns. I did not go to Darwin, up to Cairns. And it was fascinating. Beautiful, beautiful place.
Wow, you are well traveled. I imagine we could sit for hours and just talk about where you visited.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was wonderful. And then going back there was lovely as well. I mean, afterwards flying to Brisbane or of course down to Sydney, but something about the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast was it's just magical. Mackay and Bird Island and Townsville, I believe it was.
Townsville, yes.
Yeah, so all these classics going all the way up, and then Cairns was great. It was before the reef was kind of bleached or anything, and we took handfuls of chicken breast, and we were feeding these like massively large fish, and it was really exciting. It was a beautiful, beautiful country and very diverse. Yeah.
Because you're in Germany at the moment, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. What's it like
actually,
there?
I was in. It's fine. Everything is. How do I say? I was in Germany, then I was in Budapest, and for just 2 days, and then back into Germany, then back into Japan. They're still dealing with everything, over here. And, everyone's just trying to enjoy the summer, I guess, before September comes, where hopefully it won't happen, but possibly another shutdown or lockdown. But they're just being very cautious and things like that. So, but things are functioning, as Germans always make things function. So, in that sense, it's exciting. It's a great place to be. Very hot though, very, very hot. But I think that's anywhere in the world right now you go, it's going to be insanely hot, except maybe where you are. You're in your winter season
we're going
now.
through winter.
Yeah,
we're unfortunately insanely cold.
Yeah, well, enjoy it. Trust me, after being outside today, it was like a little bit too hot. So anyway, yeah, you adjust. Yes.
So what sort of work have you been doing recently that you can talk about at least?
There's one project over here in Europe, and this was something that was mentioned back in December and January. So I had to come here in January, and so we started something at that time, and then we said that we were going to finish a recording. It's gaming as well. And we said that we'd finish in summertime because at that time no one was vaccinated and no one was quite sure, how many people should be in the studio. And so what we decided on was to do first takes at that time, and then in the summer. Now they said, let's see how borders are and everything. And it's good being a German citizen. I can sneak into all these different countries, and which makes it a lot easier to get in and not have to worry about quarantining and everything. Which seems to be my new job, is being in quarantine for the last 18 months, just kind of jumping from place to place and doing 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. So I think I'm a master of quarantine right now. But it's good to be vaccinated and good to be able to jump on an airplane and go places. So I can't talk about the project, but yeah, it's moving along rather well. So I'm quite excited, and it's great to work with fellow Germans on this project. It's a very, very different studio time, and meaning that it's very different in the way that they want things done, and the number of takes or scripting and changes and editing. So it's compared to Japan. So it's been quite interesting. And there's been so many jobs this year that we've had to do at home, or they just wouldn't let us in the studio. And so I'm getting pretty good at getting used to doing a lot of this not being in the studio. So.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because I can only imagine with COVID, they would have, I guess, wanted you guys to record at home, wouldn't they? Like a lot of places would.
Yeah, and then you get into quality issues, and they'll issue a mic, and they give you this, they give you that, and but still, we're so used to having proper staff around, and people setting everything up in the recording booth. But there was fellow narrators that just didn't want to work in such an enclosed place, and to possibly, something is left in the air, because we're in an airtight studio, so it kind of freaks some of the narrators out. So a lot of the work, and I'm really surprised because some of these are the very large companies that they put this budget out, and they put a lot of time in putting these scripts together. And you think, wow, I mean, all of this recording and preparing is usually done in a studio. It's what I'm so used to for the last 30 years. In this last year and a half, it's just been doing it where you are. And I kind of worry about the quality at times, but I think we're all just trying to do our best right now to make things work. And yeah. So hopefully everything will fall into place. And if they do need to do another recording, then eventually when we can get back into studios without everyone, with a larger staff, more than 2 or 3 people, then I think we can do retakes or anything like that. So yeah, so it's good. Everything's good. It'll all fall into place.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is lucky that it is an industry that, to an extent, can be at least work done from home. I guess you can. It's not impossible to record from home, even if it's not ideal. I think
Exactly.
It's lucky to be an industry like that.
Exactly, and I think a lot of people, my colleagues, my fellow narrators I've known for 20, 25 years. A lot of them, they've never done recordings at home. That's why there's so many studios in Tokyo, and there was home recordings. I mean, that was simply unheard of, and now it's starting to eerily be like the new norm for us to do recordings at home. And I kind of feel guilty that the quality's not going to be there, but they're happy with it, and haven't had to really do any other retakes or anything like that. So I'm quite happy, and the rest of it they can just do editing and fine tuning.
Some of the things they can do with post production seems like magic sometimes, doesn't it?
exactly. And it's been a great study as well to see what you can actually do, and just beyond simple editing, just fine tuning and making sure that everything sounds, it's a match. If something was pre-recorded before or something was done, let's say 3 years ago, did a project with Nintendo 3 years ago, and they revived the project let's say they made additions to it. And so they needed the exact voice again. And so I would listen to the voice, and I was like, geez, I really hope I can, pull this one off by matching the voice exactly what we did 3 years ago, or 2017, 4 years ago now. And it's worked out. I'm quite happy with it, that they've been able to accept, these kind of recordings and consider them quality recordings. There's got to be some heavy polishing on their end. So,
is that something you've done like often, where you've had to do additional recordings for something you did years ago?
Always. It's not just Sega or companies that you might be familiar with. There's a lot of things that have been, we call it regurgitated and just brought through the whole system again. And they don't want to do a full recording again. They want to just do additions, keep up with the times, and what if it has to be with tech or has to be with politics or whatever it may be. At this time, they really, this is what they like to do. They just don't want to do a whole new project again. They'd rather just remaster what they already have. And so, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, because like you said, you've been in this industry for like 30 years now?
Yeah, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot. What made you go into this industry?
Well, as I explained earlier, I spent 1 year in Australia, and then 3 months after that, just traveling north. And then I went to Japan in 89. And at that time it was like, okay, great, I'll go over there. And then someone needed someone for it was for a TV show. And so it was the first TV show. And then they said, no, you should be doing voice as well. And I said, great. I said, let's do it. So we started doing voice, and that started, I think it was more around 28 years ago. And at that time, there was just the same narrators, or maybe 8 to 10 female narrators, and there were around 10 to 12 male narrators. And we always worked together. And it was a very, very different time, just due to production and due to technology. So we decided that, okay, we'll work together. And I decided that this is great. I found the world of narration really exciting. It was just getting in sync with background music, or adjusting a script. The scripts were really bad at the time, and the English was terrible. And
I can just picture it. I can.
Yeah, and so we had to deal with these really bad scripts, and we usually go in maybe an hour beforehand and start rewriting. And I thought the whole process of rewriting and then doing the actual production and then seeing the finished product was great. It was great on camera, but it seemed to be more interesting doing voice, because you could really, fine tune, the pitch in your voice and just get the right tone and make it match. And then we all kind of agreed that, yeah, this matches, this sounds good, or this doesn't work. And then, so you just kind of find your niche, and then, time goes on, and you just work with the same companies, the same, have it be you or a production company, or a larger company that wanted voice, and they like to use the same person for, what I finally learned was, 2 years, but turns out to be decades. And sometimes, someone would call you up from Fuji TV or something, and you kind of forgot what you did, 10 years earlier, because that day you might have done 2 or 3 narrations. And I loved that part where you're in for an hour or 2 hours, and then you're done, and then you run off to the next studio and then do the second narration. And some days it was 3 or 4 narrations a day. And this went on for, if I was in Tokyo at that time, could go on Saturdays and Sundays as well. And it was the beginning, I guess, of foreign narrators being there. And, anything from doing linguistic tapes, language tapes, very, very basic, or doing TOEFL or TOEIC. And then from there, it went on to TV commercials, radio commercials, promotion videos, gaming. The variety was endless, and you never knew what you were really getting into until you got to the studio, or if you were lucky, you got the script beforehand so you could prepare. And I just thought the whole process of having nothing at the beginning and a bunch of people putting their thoughts together, and then you get to think, well, you know what, I think it's better to say it this way, or do it that way, or let's use this voice, or let's go higher, let's go lower. And it was just a really interesting process. I think I love getting caught up in a process, and that was one of the more exciting processes to be involved with.
Something you said there made me think of something else I was going to ask you, which was, and I don't know if you would split your work in this way, but you've done roles where I guess you're doing a character, right?
Correct. Yes.
You are this character, and then you've also done commercials, like you said, radio and stuff like that. Do you have a preference to either of those? Do you think do you prefer doing a character, or do you like doing the more radio style commercials? What do you prefer?
I think that goes back to your last question. Why? I think the reason is that it's so diverse. You're doing, some of the most beautiful TV commercials I've ever seen in my life were done in Japan. They were like mini movies that would run for either 15 seconds, 30 seconds, or the odd time, it could even run for a 60-second commercial. And they were like little mini movies and great background music. And also the visuals were wonderful. And so you start getting into doing that sort of thing. And I really enjoyed doing TV commercials or radio commercials. You would do in Japanese and in English, and you would work with Japanese narrators together, and then you could go do promotion videos for different companies, or in-house, or for events like Tokyo Motor Show, or when there was large game shows, and there was always events every year, and so they needed someone to make presentations and pre-record all of these things for the different events that they had booths set up at. And so then people would hear your voice. And so I don't know, there's just something fascinating. It was never the same thing. And I think that's what made it interesting. Every time you went in the studio, it was something new, and it was a bigger challenge, or it was never the same thing twice. So that's what makes it really exciting. And comparing that to so radio commercials and TV commercials, and comparing that to doing something, actually on camera. On camera was also very interesting, but you're on camera doing sometimes anywhere from 14 to 18 hours a day, and then you get the old red eye when you're getting really tired by the 16th hour. And there was usually we did the CNN Japan when it first came out, and I had a wonderful Japanese colleague that she was a professional announcer for TBS station, and then she went over to CNNJ. I mean, this was all brand new. This is just when CNN was entering the market in Japan, and it was all done for satellite. But 90% of the customers were foreigners in Japan. They were, for example, people that were expats that wanted their news, but they wanted kind of mixed news of local meaning what was going on, national news, what was going on in Japan, and then they would take cuts from CNN in the States, from Atlanta, and they would just edit that in. So it was the best of both worlds. And but I still think narration, there was just something a lot more interesting about narration. You're kind of behind the curtain and pulling the strings that way. And when you're doing on-camera work, like I said, you at 16 hours are like, why do you look tired? It's like, well, we've been in the studio for 16 hours with, a 30-minute break. And, after a while, it just kind of, you have to be really prepared, and you have to look really, that you just have been working for 30 minutes, not, 13 hours. And so there was just something about narration that, I don't know, we all fall into our passions, and sometimes the passion chooses us. And I think that's what happened with narration.
How often did you do on-camera work then, these huge 16-hour days and such? Was that a common occurrence?
Yeah, that was a lot. It was so long some of the days that I remember I had narration work, and so they would let my colleague everything was pre-recorded. We never did live. It would actually go out maybe the next day or the following day because it was news related, but it was never like a live broadcast. So I would end up going to a studio, perhaps I had narration, and I'd say, okay, listen, I have to go to do this narration. It's going to take 30 minutes to get to the studio and an hour and a half to record and 30 minutes back. And then where we weren't working together. So there was always a way to work around that. So there was a lot of on camera. And then I think on camera narration kind of dominated afterwards. It was just easier to fit into a schedule, and so the shift happened with doing voice work compared to on camera. Before, on camera was maybe 90%, and then slowly narration came in and became 50-50. And now, as far as doing on camera, I mean, everything is, we already know what they're going to ask right away. They're just going to say that, listen, this is going to be used only on the net. This is only going to be used for in-house. So the whole production has changed. Like, to do a radio commercial now, it's unheard of. And I even asked my colleagues, I said, when was the last time you did a radio commercial or you did a TV commercial, like a tag at the end for Sony or Fujitsu or any of these companies? And they kind of go blank because none of them can really remember the last time they did that. Everything now is done, for ads online. And, the whole idea of advertising has changed so much. It was more hands-on before. And now it's just a totally different game. As you can see, we're doing something now that would have been unheard of, 20 years ago to do something like this. It just didn't happen. You needed the whole team there. So it was exciting because it was the beginning. I think I've heard of people that were there in the 80s, and that was probably 100% on camera. And then coming more in the 90s, that's when, their narration really started to pick up. And when gaming started, maybe in 95 and 2000, the beginning of 2000 was probably the biggest boom for doing gaming, for, have it be Nintendo or Sega or, Capcom or, Bandai, or there's many different gaming companies, probably about 7 or 8 that we would do, and then then just kind of stay with the same people. And that was one thing about Japan. They used you, they got used to you, and they liked using you again. And it's something about the Japanese mentality where they liked the consistency, and they didn't want a new flavor every month. They wanted the same person to do the same job. And I still have colleagues that have been doing the same roles for maybe over 20 years now. And some projects were weekly, and they ran approximately 8 or 10 years for Tokyo Tocho, as the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. I went through 3 governors. I did all of their speeches in English, and I would record the English version over their Japanese speeches, and it was used always for other mayors or anyone that was an official from another country that wanted to know what was going on in Tokyo. So we did that every Thursday at the Tokyo Metropolitan Government. And so again, it was the diversity that was there, and there was never a dull day. And my colleagues would always say, and I would have to agree with this, it was fun. I mean, how many people can say it was actually fun going to work? It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, it was a magical time. It was the beginning of that era of doing games, of doing company videos, or it was also the time for brand new TV or radio commercials. And it's just the brilliance behind it and the writing and the flexibility you have to, they'll ask for your input. How would you think it should be said? Or, what tone would you use? And so doing characters were interesting. But you have to realize with video games, a lot of them were like fighting scenes. And it really put a big strain on your voice. And I learned early on that, all the fighting scenes and everything like that, do it at the end because, you're always dying or you're getting shot or you're getting stabbed or something like that. And we used to record that first. And then they said, okay, now we're going to do the lines. You really didn't have any voice left after that because you were screaming for like an hour and a half. And it was just interesting how people could take a simple idea and then get a group of maybe 10 to 20 people all with their own jobs to do and bring it together. And then finally see the finished product and you're like, wow, I remember that was just a couple, a scribble on the back of a napkin that someone showed me. It was such a process that everyone would work on together because we were kind of navigating new territory. And they wanted quality, but they didn't want to keep doing, retakes or once it was decided, everyone looked around at each other. It's like, yeah, that's it. That's the one we're going to use. And you just felt it. And that was probably the greatest satisfaction any voice actor, any narrator can say is that, yeah, it's that take. It's like take 3 or take 4. The pitch was perfect. The sound was perfect. It reached, exactly, the heights, the limits that I wanted to and what they wanted from me. And so we'd all just kind of were in agreement that, yeah, let's say that take right there, 3 or 4, that was perfect. And, 1 and 2, we just knew. We didn't even have to say it was too high, it was too low, or needed more bass to it, to your voice, or it just didn't match, or it was too slow. Never happened like that. We just kind of natural instinct. Yeah, that fits, that one right there. And it was a time that after you finish the job, they would say to you, so which one do you think? I would say, yeah, definitely take number, whatever it was. And they would say, yeah, we also think that one too. So, and then you'd think, well, maybe we can try to do better. And then you just kind of throw in a couple extra takes after you're done. And then you realize, no, the one that we all agreed on in the first place was the one that they ended up using. So I just found the whole production and the whole teamwork to be very interesting. And it was the beginning of doing many projects in the country that they hadn't really done before. And so narration was kind of a new world. And many of the narrators, well, not many, the ones that are remaining, maybe 3 or 4 that I've known for well over 25 years that are still in Japan, they would probably tell you the same thing, that it was just a I won't say it's a commodity, but it was just nonstop. And I thought that was the norm. I thought everyone did 3 or 4 different narrations a day until I realized that no, in the States, for example, you're lucky if you do 3 or 4 narrations a year. And for us, it was just nonstop. And, it was the time that not a lot of people went to Japan. I mean, people went to Japan basically to change planes, or, they'd fly into Narita to go on to somewhere else. And so there weren't a lot of foreigners there at the time. And the ones that were there were dedicated to their craft. And it was just a great inspiration, and just allowed all of us to put, our minds together and work hard together and come up with a quality product. And I think the process itself is probably more exciting than the finished product.
That's almost a shame, because the part that everyone gets to see is the finished product ultimately. They don't get to see the process very often. And I think you're right. It is a very interesting and sometimes almost crazy thing to see like you said, you'll have notes on a napkin, and then suddenly you look at the finished product and it's almost like, how did it get here? It's insane sometimes.
Exactly. That's very well said. That's how it all came together. But the process was fun. I still think the process is fun. It's the idea of the hunt, I guess you can say. It's more fun to hunt than to catch, and it's just the buildup of trying to find the right way and trying to find solutions and trying to keep the sponsor happy. number one, you have to keep the sponsor happy. Number two, you have to keep the production company happy. And number three, you have to keep the agency happy. So you had to keep, everyone had to be satisfied. And that only happened in the process. And I understand now that if people have never, been in the narration world or have never been in the studio or been in pre or post production, they don't understand that this one line or these 10 lines could have taken maybe a week of retakes or something that we weren't happy with or changes. There's been a lot of times where jobs were done that I thought they were done, and then the sponsor came up and said, "No, we're going to be using a different tag," or the company's decided that they want to use this logo, and I thought, "Wow, this is really, really interesting. How all of this comes together and how we can all agree on it. Two different cultures doing a language that that most of them didn't even understand." This was very interesting to be in the studio, and you're doing things, and they're kind of looking at you like, "Was it okay?" And then you realize that you're dealing with the director, the producer, you're dealing with the client, everyone in Japanese. And so all communication was only in Japanese, and then you're doing the job in, let's say, in English, and then they're not quite sure if your pronunciation was good, or they're not quite sure. They can only listen to the tone, and the tone feels right for them. That's good. But then you're done. They say, "Well, Brian, what do you think?" And I'm like, "You know what? Let's do take two, or let's do paragraph 2 again. I think I can do it better, and I think I can, make it a little bit lighter. So, just nenno tamini, just for the sake of it, why don't we just do another take? And then we can say, yeah, yes or no." And the same thing that we already got it maybe earlier, but it's always nice to add, try a pitch higher or slower, or, do something else. But they relied on the narrator to say, "Yeah, I think that's good. That's fine." Because many of them didn't speak any English. So these are big companies. Has
that changed much at the moment?
No,
it's still very much like you're the sort of the last bastion of good English when it comes to these scripts.
Yeah, that's correct. From rewriting, the scripts that if you were lucky enough to get the script prior, you own like 2 different sizes of red markers, and it's like, no. And then they kind of rely on you to say, "Hey, they didn't ask you why you were making changes. You might say, "Matansu," like this should be in single, this should be in plural, or this wording is a little bit off, or it's Japanese English." But the problem is that they would already have the video done, and they would also have something already in print. And it would be, we had one for Kanebo, Beautiful Human Life. And you try to explain to them that, wow, that's really Japanese English. But they're like, "No, sorry, that's been our logo for, 5 or 10 years or something." And so you say Beautiful Human Life. And, in the West, they would just kind of laugh at you. But in Japan, there were so many people that didn't speak English that Beautiful Human Life, they could understand each word individually, and they could put their own idea of what it actually meant, Beautiful Human Life. Grammatically, it's not correct, but this is the beauty of advertising. You can say what you'd like and put it all together, and hopefully it comes out well in the end.
You said something there that sort of sparked a memory in me, which was you were saying that when you have someone who's not done that sort of work, who's not been in the studio or anything like that, and they don't understand this might have been this short 15 seconds might have been the result of hours and hours of work. Because I used to do radio work, and we'd have people come into the studio who maybe hadn't done a lot of recording, especially not of pre-recorded stuff, and they never understood that. So they'd do their one take and they'd get up to go, and it's like, no, please, can we just have a couple more, try this, try that? Because I think that's the beauty of it, is the being able to experiment with it and try different things. And even, like you said, even if you've got the take, sometimes it's fun to be like, well, maybe we'll try something else and it will sound good, but rarely ever does. You always go back to that one take, don't you?
Exactly. That's probably 90% of the times. When you know it, you hit the nail right on the head. It's like, yeah, that's it, right there. That pitch was perfect. the timing was great. And if there was a video there that had to match up with it, you'd get a cue. You'd get a cue. The cue lamp would go off, and you'd start. Boom. You'd start perhaps maybe half a second later, and then you had to be out by, let's say, at 36 seconds, and then you'd get out at maybe at 35.5, and just give that little bit of time for editing or sliding up and down the narration track, which would go over the video. So yeah, people have no idea the amount of time that it takes to put something together. It's not a one-shot walk in, like you said, walk in, walk out. And no, there's a lot involved. Or, there's many times you get called back because even though the sponsor was there, the sponsor then would take it back to his boss, I guess, or the other, someone's, production company would even say, well, listen, why don't we add this in instead? Or we changed our mind. We want to do it this way. And so you get called. There's a lot of callbacks, and there still is a lot of callbacks for redos due to maybe something that you said, or maybe you wanted something you wanted to add, or something that the staff decided that day. It was never fixed unless it was you were doing TOEIC or TOEFL, where there was no room to move. Those were set. Those were that testing material for people to get scores of 800 or 850 or whatever it was at the time, so they could get into university, so they could get in, they could show their score for a job that required, let's say, bilingual skills. And yeah, so there was no movement on those, but everything else became very, very artistic. And that's the beauty of narration.
So I had a question for you, actually. What how do you normally find your work? Are you going out and putting yourself out there, or are you at a point where people are coming to you and saying, "Hey, Brian, we want you to do this or to do that for us"?
Do you mean now or at the beginning?
I guess we could go with both. What about now? I'm assuming now's probably a bit more people coming to you.
Yeah, you work right because you work with the same people. The Japanese love working with the same people. There's just something that gives them comfort. It gives them some kind of security. It was best explained to me many, many years ago when someone said that they were always nervous when they were doing foreign narration because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of them didn't speak English. And when they don't speak English, they are like, geez, like, what do we do? What do we do? And that's where the confusion came in, or that's where the uncertainty came in. And so you kind of had to really put them at ease and say, no, that's fine. That's fine. So once they got comfortable with you, they would keep you on for the next job, or they would call back for, the same company, but for a different video or for a different commercial, or maybe the commercial gets updated, or they run it for, you say one cool is maybe like 3 months, or two cools would run for 6 months. And then after 6 months, if it was a great success for them, they'd try to up their game a bit. And then we'd add another line, or, do something totally different. So it was working with the same people these days that is probably 80% of the work now. When I say the same people, it's not just the sponsor themselves. It's usually the production company that has known you for 20 years, and they just feel comfortable with you. They know your range. They know your ability. Are you easy to work with? Are you on time? Are you going to give a quality, performance? You don't smoke. You don't, your voice is in good, good shape, I guess you could say, and you're sounding good. And, they want the consistency. They don't like the risk factor of kind of veering off to another person or veering off to another direction. That's the majority. It's not the 100% rule. It's more of 80% of, okay, we've worked together before, and so let's do this project. It could be a totally different project, but they still are used to it. So it all comes down, I think, more to the production company. And then so the production company will call you, and they'll just say, hey, listen, do you remember when you worked? And sometimes it's like, no, I don't. Or other times, yeah, I remember that. And that's usually if they say the job, you like, oh, that job, that's right. And then so they'll say, well, listen, they like this part of that job that you did. Can you do it, do another narration for them? And through this production company, again, not the sponsor, but do the same voice or do the same way, But for, let's say, instead of doing something for cars, you're going to do something now for electronics, but just keep the same pitch and keep the same tone. So it just works. One thing I noticed was that in Western countries, they wanted really a low, groveling kind of voice, and very strong and very low. And it seemed so standard. And we had a few narrators in Tokyo that were doing the same thing, that just very, very low. They had no range, just one very, very, the bass was just phenomenal in their voices. But they also wanted, Japan was different in the sense that they wanted someone who could do higher voices, someone who could do softer voices. It's a totally different market than the Western market. They try to go for more, I think, of the more gentle kind of voice and non-threatening kind of voice, and just something. Yeah. So that's the one thing I've noticed to be the greatest difference. Overseas, they were always wanting that low voice and just heavy on the bass and everything. And the Japanese, not so much. They wanted something different because there seemed to be many of them that were already doing that kind of voice, and they knew that the range was so small that this is what they'd get. And other times they were like, no, we want someone who can give, more of a range, which basically meant a guy that can go with a male narrator that can go with a higher pitch, or, add something to his voice, or at least give him 3 or 4 different ranges. And so then the production company remembers you, and they keep up with you, and they want to use you again. So that's how that process works. And also agency, the Japanese never hire direct. They always wanted to go through an agency, simply because they felt if something were to go wrong, then they could blame the Japanese agent and say, hey, wait a minute, you didn't fulfill your obligation, and you said that this narrator or this person can do this or do that. In reality, it's not what we wanted. So it was easier to always be hired through an agency. And there was probably 30, there still is over 30 different agencies that you registered with and that you've worked with. And then they decide on who they're going to use. And but if you already know the production company, doing something direct with them is still not common to this day. And you have a lot of middlemen, and nothing is direct anymore. It never was. It was always having at least a couple of middlemen involved. So you'd have, let's say, the sponsor, then you'd have production company number 1, then production company number 2, and then you'd have an agency, and then you have the narrator. And to be honest with you, this has not really changed in 30 years, and they still want to go through an agency. Then that's probably 80% of it still that way. There's that odd 20% that they've known you so long that they just go direct with you.
I guess, so obviously, like you said, if, these people love hiring people they've worked with and stuff, did you find it difficult when you were first starting, when you hadn't worked with these studios, these production companies, and you were trying to, show them, hey, I can do this, I'm good, hire me, bring me in for work? Was that challenging back in the day?
Not at all. No, because I think it was being in the right place at the right time. And so, no, I would say it would be just the opposite. Surprisingly, it was not an issue at all. It's, I don't know, right place, right time, and with the right people, it all falls into place, and you just go with it. And that's went on for a long time. I'd say well over 20 years that way. And then when the whole business started to change, regarding less TV and less radio commercials and less presentation videos, then, or even large games or something like that, then it's changed in the last 10 years dramatically. But in the first 20 years, I'd say no, it was pretty consistent. It was actually very consistent. And so it was just nonstop working for multiple people. And the only thing you had to make sure was that you didn't do, if you had that, like I mentioned earlier, you have 1 kuru or 2 kuru, and that 1 3-month package or 2 3-month package would give you 6 months. If it was a car company, you had to agree that you would not do another car company while this one was being aired. So, you do the production, you do the recording, and then maybe a week later. So let's say we're at the beginning of July now. The middle of July, it was already ready to be. They bought time slots for the different TV stations or the radio stations, and then from there they would just, okay, we're going to send this out in the next week, and then they just go with it, and then that's how it works. So interesting process again.
Oh, absolutely. I could listen to you talk about it for yonks, but unfortunately...
Yeah, you're actually making me remember a lot of things that I think you kind of go in automatic mode, and you understand, okay, let's say on Friday at 10 a.m., you're going to be at a studio in Ebisu or Akasaka, and you're going to be there at 10 o'clock. You're going to be doing it till 1 p.m., let's say a 3-hour recording, and you just kind of focus on, those 3 hours and that day and that time. And usually everything is pretty much, Japanese prepare a lot. And so when things were well prepared on everyone's side, and you did your job as well by preparing the script and by keeping your voice healthy and not catching colds or anything like that. It was magical.
You had much control over, like trying to not catch a cold? Was that a worry you had a lot of?
Well, it made your life a lot boring. I mean, you didn't go out, drinking, or you didn't go to smoky places. I mean, Japan, it was either smoking or chain smoking sections. And, there wasn't like I'm a non-smoker. So for me, it was fine because I didn't smoke, but going into places, even in studios, like I said, you have to say to him, would you mind not smoking? Because, you're going to get a worse, or quite a bad quality from the narrator, not just myself, but my fellow narrators. No one wanted us to have, like I said, the smoking and chain smoking section. So they would kind of clear that out. So no, you just had to take care of your voice. I mean, this is what you do for a living. And so you just had to make sure that you're physically and mentally the best you could be. And as far as your voice, it had to be in pristine condition. Unfortunately, living in the city of, greater Tokyo of over 30 million people, you're in constant contact with people. So there were times where it was like, oh, geez, I can feel my sinuses are acting up or something. And, it's like, you go in the studio, you can't pretend on this one. They knew right away that, and you knew right away as well. So it was just like, you sound nasally, or you just sound a bit stuffed up or something like that. So there was a few times that happened. But I don't know, we still got through somehow. I don't know how, but we managed to get through. There wasn't any situation that was like I can't speak at all, so I can't do this, or I can't go there that day. So knock on wood, I think it was just a lot of luck. That's for sure.
We all need a bit of luck now and then.
That's for sure.
Now look, Brian, I'm talking to you. I have to ask you at least one question about Monkey Ball.
Mm-hmm.
What's your reaction been to fans' excitement over the recent Monkey Ball announcement?
I think a bit bittersweet, and a little bit overwhelming. It was just a little bit too much. I kind of had to shut things off and just kind of shut things down. I knew when this announcement would be made, and everyone kept saying, "What about E3? What about E3?" And it's like, oh dear, if I kind of dug myself a hole here. You have to be careful what you say, and what is presented. And it's a work in motion. I mean, this was, we're during this last year and a half, nothing has been normal. And so when it came to studio, came to writing, things were delayed or things were changed. I've never seen anything like it in 30 years. There was nothing normal about this at all. Nothing. I say that simply because everything was so structured before, and this was the very first time that things weren't fully decided, because you couldn't get everyone together at once, and people were working remote, and there was just a lot of interaction was done that way. And when it came to studio time, you're used to seeing, I don't know, like I said, 10 to 15 people in a studio. Now there was just maybe 2, 3 people. And then there's a room that they would put plastic sheets over everything and separate. So you couldn't really see or talk to them, because it's like a mousetrap, I guess you could say, or a mouse maze, that you're here in the booth, and you have just two people doing tech, and then other people are in a room that you can't see at all, but they have a camera in the booth, so they can communicate with you that way. So this was a very challenging and very difficult 18 months, and time-wise, trying to get production done. A lot of changes, more than I've ever seen in 30 years. With these changes, that you think that you're done, and you think that, okay, this is good, and then something comes up, or without getting in too much detail, there was let's say side A and side B that were working for the same, of course they're the same company, but they didn't maybe agree on how to go about this or what they were going to do. It was kind of more doing it along the way. And it was one of the longest recording sessions, but I understand that, because, you're in lockdown, you're not in lockdown, you're recording, or, your fellow narrators don't want to go into the booth. They don't feel comfortable. I mean, some of them, two female narrators would, made them sign a paper that everything would be sterilized in the studio, and you could only have one person recording at once. These are things that we've never even thought of before, and things that we never did before. So the whole process was really very, very, very difficult to get through. And then there would be like full on, and then there would be maybe a month or 2 months of just quiet, because we couldn't do anything. And again, things just changed, radically changed. I don't think I've ever seen or been surprised myself by so many changes as this job. Plus, we have the original recordings, and it's not difficult. I mean, it's my voice, so, and it wasn't. I just kind of going back to it was like April 2000 when we did the recording, and with Nagoshi and Kantoku. He was directing at the time when it was Amusement Vision, and so you kind of take your cue from them, and they knew what they wanted. And so using the original, because this is, we'll call it like remastered of 1 and 2, they didn't want to leave and stray away too much from visuals or from voice or from lines, anything from, Fallout to, Turkey, and all of these lines that we did before. They still wanted to incorporate them, because this is what it was. This was basically a polished, or 20 years later, of doing 1 and 2 all over again. And the quality back then was not much different than what it is now as far as recording quality. So, you get to hear the originals, and it's like, yeah. So it's interesting that, parts that they use and parts that they don't use. And there's also different zones, different areas. There's, you're talking Sega of Europe, you're talking Sega America, you're talking Sega Sammy Holdings in Japan. So you're creating, and you don't know where it's going to end up, because they haven't decided yet where things will end up. And this is something that we've never had to deal with before. We've pretty much had direction before, and we knew schedules, we knew time frames, and this has been a very, very, very long process, one that I've never seen before. When it was a long process before, it was because it was a series, and we'd have to do different parts, or if it was anything to do with gaming, we would have to, we'd record, and maybe it would be, 10 different sessions stretched over a month or 2 months. It wasn't uncommon. So you record many, many different lines, and then they ask you to what you think is a good addition, or what you think might work here. And sometimes there's visuals, sometimes there's no visuals, sometimes there's cells of the actual characters that you can see, and that was quite interesting it reminded me of 20 years ago of seeing the original cells before everything was actually put together. So it was a lot of that, and so I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out everything myself, to be honest. Right now, what we did and what we what is used and what's not used, and who they brought back, and who they what characters they're using, and what voice they're going to use, or are they going to keep it to the original, or are they not going to keep it to the original? But I think we all know that enough has been released already that the majority of it is that they wanted this Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2 were their best selling out of the whole series, best selling as far as figures for them overseas. And strange enough, it was never popular in Japan. I mean, this was made for the Japanese market first when we originally did it, and it just didn't click with the Japanese. They couldn't wrap themselves around this game. They found it just wasn't as interesting for them. It was interesting in America, and I think that's what was the biggest surprise, or in Europe. And I think it was 12. I saw recently that there was like 12 different production companies that would buy for different regions in especially in Europe. I mean, America is America, but when it came to Europe, I mean, you're dealing with production companies that are separate in the UK to what they are in Germany, and to what they are in Sweden, in Italy, and in France, and Spain, all different. And maybe the 4 countries had the same production company. Other than that, no, they weren't. They were just different production companies. So I think trying to put all of this together during this difficult time was a great challenge for everyone. And you sometimes felt you were going back, taking back steps, and you're like, why are we going, 1 step forward, 2 steps back? But I think that's probably in any industry in the last 18 months, that's what everyone was doing. They were taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, and kind of reassessing, and nothing was done in any kind of chronological order. So this was the very first time that you could see, you knew what you were doing, you knew what you had a very good idea of what the project and what things would look like, but the order was so erratic, and I think this was the part that you just kind of said, okay, well, I think I understand this is what they want this time for this, but there's a great chance that this is going to change, which, happened to be the case, that they would have to make changes. And so it was very, very different going back to the originals, where we did recordings in 2000 and 2001. And so, it was, I think, 5 or 6, 7 different recordings. And, Sega had, at that time, was out towards Haneda Airport, and there's like 3 different annexes. So we'd record there, and it was never in the same place. And this time, you notice now that it's not even there, because a lot of workers weren't in the building at the time. So it'd either be another studio, or it would be something like what we're doing right now. And so it was hard to schedule anything, or to understand what's next, or what's coming, or how do I plan, or can I do something else in the meantime? You just didn't know, and it's something that I'm just not used to. I was used to more of everything being in order, and when everything was in order, you knew exactly the dates. You kind of knew when the release would be, and this is the first time things were really shaken up. But this happened with a lot of other jobs as well. Yeah, did that.
The more you talk about that process, the more I'm just like, wow,
it was long.
It sounds crazy that it got done at all, really.
Yeah,
like there's a product, it was done, and it sounds amazing that everyone was able to actually get it done, given how challenging it must have been.
Yeah, it's surprising, and I think I've mentioned this before and somewhere else, that there was a big push going in February and last September, but in between there could be some lulls for a month or 2 months. So,
well, look, Brian, we've been talking for a while. I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I was hoping to ask you maybe 2 more questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
So the first one basically is, if someone were wanting to go down the path of working with their voice and doing that type of career, what would be a bit of advice you'd have for them?
Make sure that this is something that you're passionate about doing and you're patient in doing, because it's as you heard from 20, 30 years ago, it was a very different world than what it is now. And so I would say, if you're passionate and you feel that you have the right tone, or you feel that it fits somewhere, then get your voice out there and just to as many places as possible, and get yourself heard, and never say no. Just say yes. There was kind of a mantra going around that you never say no. You just say yes to everything. Some jobs were really, really bad, but still you always could learn from them. And I would say, just don't say no. You say yes to everything. Then you build up this portfolio of voices. If you're lucky enough to get a copy, you keep the copy, and then the new sponsors or new agency would hear that, and then it opens more doors for you. So build up your portfolio. Voice samples are king. You have to have a lot of voice samples and a lot of variety, because don't forget, if you're working with a new client or you're working with a new agency, they may have not worked with you before, or they may have not seen you for a while, and what they want to hear first. So instead of seeing you, everything works on voice samples, and so you have to have a wide variety of voice samples. I'd say if you have a very unique voice, if you can, if you're able to hit higher notes, if you want to say notes or higher pitch, go for it. I mean, sometimes being quirky or being not that normal, gravelly low voice can get you a lot farther. So you just know your limits and know what your talents are, where they lie, and put your voice out there and never say no. To say yes to everything, because even a bad job turns out to be a good job in the end, because that bad job has taught you something that you didn't know about yourself or your voice before. And that's how you build up, and just patience, especially now. It just takes a lot of patience for things to be done, because, especially now in Japan, with the Olympics coming up, and variants and spreading, and lack of vaccinations going on, I think this has taught us all in this industry that it's a waiting game right now, and that's where the patience comes in, and patience usually pays off. And in the meantime, just keep yourself busy and just keep getting your recordings out there. Someone will hear them somewhere, and they'll like what they hear, or they like your style, and just be true, and don't try to mimic or copy anyone else, and know where your strengths are.
I definitely love your bit of advice of never say no, just say yes. I think that's something I need to carry over into my general life.
You'd be surprised, yeah. You think the one that means nothing, or you're like, nah, I don't want to do that one. I've got no interest in that. Or it was like, say, I don't know. There was a golf game I did one time. It's like, for Wii, and I'm like, really? Like, I really don't like golf. And I thought, well, no. And Wii, I thought Wii was a fascinating product, and I thought, okay, well, just go ahead and do the voice for Wii. And I thought, wow, I don't. And then you do it, and then it's like, wow, I learned something. Number one, I learned something about golf, and number two, I learned, I met different staff, and then just take that with you, and even something that you think that it's not a match or it's not going to work, in the end, it does work, because it opens up another door. And that's why I say never say no, just say yes, because you're always going to learn, and it's going to open up another door somewhere else, even if it's a bad narration or if it's a bad job. I have still some colleagues that refuse to do commercials for condoms due to religious beliefs or alcohol. And they're like, one agent, Miki-san, I do condom commercials, and for a Japanese condom maker. And they're like, oh, yeah. I said, yeah, I do remember that one. Well, they've got another recording. and they want to use your voice again, like for Okamoto condoms. And it was interesting because a lot of narrators kind of shied away from doing stuff like that. And to me, it's like, why would you shy away? It's a product. It's a quality product. It's a good company. And, you don't let your personal beliefs or anything like that get involved. Remember, this is a job. This is an experience. And you might surprise yourself by doing something like this. And actually doing Okamoto condom commercials was a lot of fun. I mean, they were fascinating. They were very well done and very well put together. So yeah, just always say yes. It can't hurt. And that allows you also to build up your portfolio. And by having voice samples in your portfolio, that leads to the next step. And I think this is where people have to kind of swallow their pride or say, well, no, I don't do this or that. No, you should do everything. It's not going to hurt you at all. It's only going to help you grow as a narrator, and it's also going to help you grow in the business. And the flexibility that you offer as well. The sponsor sees, wow, this guy is very easy to work with, or this lady narrator, the male narrator, the female narrator, they're very easy to work with. And so that's also part of it. Just being on time, keeping your voice healthy, and being consistent. Consistency is key. It's not a one-off. And I think this is where people might make the mistake of grabbing just one big one and then that's it. Well, time goes on, and I'd rather do it the way that I was taught, was just to be consistent and consistently be there, consistently be on time, consistently give a quality job and do the best that you can, and don't take it for granted. I think when you start taking it for granted or you start refusing, then you're kind of putting yourself, and not them, but you're doing it yourself. You're putting yourself into a certain, how can I say, you're putting yourself in a certain niche market, and that market might not be as big as you expect. So why not just stretch out everything? I still do TOEFL, I still do TOEIC, and they're probably the same scripts from 20 or 30 years ago. But a lot of people don't like doing English conversation tapes as well. I still enjoy them. It's still great practice, and it's also great to see what's changed. If a recording was done 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they're still using the same TOEIC and TOEFL material, and you think, oh, instead of saying the fax machine or something like that, now of course the Japanese still use fax machines. So, but beyond that, then we're adding new technology, and we have to change this, or we have to change that, or a country has changed its name, or, regions have changed, politics have changed. So, you have to stay open, you have to stay flexible to these changes. And I think that's what leads anyone who's really serious about getting into this business, that's what leads to success.
That's some fantastic advice. I hope anyone who is interested takes all of that on board, because I'm going to be seriously thinking about that now. So I have one more question for you, and this one, look, I know you're not going to be able to go into detail on this, so I'm not going to try and push you to, but I think it's important to maybe mention it, because I think the more people that are aware that this is an issue, the better. You've sort of been talking recently about people not being paid. Is that a common issue in the industry?
Yeah, it's funny. I've spoken with 3 different agents about this, and I worked with Patrick Harlan for, I think he came around 27 years ago. I remember his first job when we were working together, and his agency and stuff like that. And I was talking to his agent. We're in constant contact, and when we did the first Super Monkey Ball together, we were the only 2 foreigners at that time that were doing it. The rest were Japanese staff. And it's I would say that unfortunately they all agreed that going back, it was just the way things were in Japan at the time. They did not allow unions for foreigners, yet there were unions for Japanese narrators. So you would do work, and then I've had my voice used even for Super Monkey Ball. People, the great thing about this, when Nick did all of this, when Nick Robinson did all of this, was it brought people, said, oh, by the way, look, I found this and I found that, and it's your voice that you did for one recording, and then they sell it to, let's say, a Korean gaming company, and or an American gaming company or a European gaming company. And I think that's the part that it was, since there was no union and because they're foreign narrators, the Japanese have an idea, an image in their mind that you're going to come, you're going to do the job, and then you're going to go back to your country. Like you're not going to stay on for, a long period of time. And this is where the issue came up where it's not just myself, but a lot of people, a lot of our work was being used, but a lot of our work was being sold to different companies without our knowledge. And it kind of hurts you because then you get overexposed, or you get kind of like, oh, there's the Super Monkey Ball guy. And they kind of think that, well, that's all you can do. And it's like, well, no, actually, that's a smaller part of my portfolio. There's other things that I've done so much more work, but that all ties into the same issue that they feel that you've recorded, and I know it's not this way in Australia, it's not this way in Canada, the States, or in Europe. Usually when you do a recording, you know where it's going, when it's going to be used, how long it's going to be used. And in this case, it was kind of upsetting to see a lot of my, fellow narrators that, and not for the English, but for foreign language narrators, that they weren't credited, or their voice was also sold or used somewhere else. And I just think ethically and morally and legally, it's just not the right thing to do. I think,
No, it is not.
And the proper thing is that you are the owner of those lines. You are the owner of those of your own voice, of course. You own that. You own those lines, even though you didn't write those lines. You said those lines under Japanese law. Those are yours. But that's probably the darker side of the whole business, is that something that you worked hard for and you believed was for just one project ends up being used in many other projects. And so therefore you move on and you're doing other things, and then someone says, oh, wait a minute, I just heard your voice, let's say on a game that it was on a flight on Japan Airlines or something. And it was like, what? No, I never did that. And then, maybe months later, someone will find a copy, or they'll say, hey, by the way, I took a copy, and I'll show you. It's like, wow, they really did use it somewhere else, or they sold it somewhere else. And so it's common. It's becoming less common now, but back then, and even up till, I don't know, maybe even up to 5 years ago, anything you did, nothing was signed. It was just a gentleman's agreement where you'd shake hands, and it was understood that, okay, listen, we're doing this recording for this job. It's going to be used for this amount of time. It's going to be used. Let's say Sega sells to Nintendo. Sega sells to another company. And then you think, okay, well, I agree to those terms. But when you find your voices in, like I said, Korea or Hong Kong or mainland China, it's like, wait a minute, I don't remember ever agreeing or ever stating that I give my permission to use my voice in all of these different platforms or all of these different companies. So you've sold my voice, which is my property, to another company, and they've gone on and sold it to someone else. So it's a domino effect. It just keeps going and going and going. And then the bad part is that when you're up to do another game, they're like, you're a little bit overexposed. You've done too much. And have it be Resident Evil or Hitaruman or Shenmue or Super Monkey Ball, any of those games that sold really well, or Daytona that did very, very well in the States. This is an issue because years later, it's easier to regurgitate, I guess, a game and take the original and exactly what they're doing right now, just polish it up and make the graphics look better, and but use the original voice, because this is the time now where it seems retro. is exciting, and this is the new thing for other, a younger audience now, and yet it also is what I've learned through this last year and a half since Nick first found me, that it's I don't know, it's really interesting how our voices or how our hard work, I like to know where it goes, and I like to know where it's being used. And I want it to be fair. I want to play everyone to play fair. And maybe that's a bit naive in thinking, but this is what gives you longevity in the business, is playing fair and being fair. And it's a bit upsetting when that doesn't happen, because then, it's very easy for Capcom or I don't know, Bandai to say, well, you know what, listen, sorry, but, we heard your voice and we want to do another game in Korea, but, we heard your voice. And I'm like, well, I didn't do it in Korea. And then they show it to you, and it's like, so they don't want to use you. So it works against you maybe in that sense, because you're overexposed. So I really hope that, I know a union will never happen. They tried that, 8 or 10 years ago, and they basically chased the girl out of Japan that was putting the union together. And so she was kind of blacklisted for trying to put something together like that. And in the Western world, I mean, everything is contracted. And this is something I've had the chance to learn in the last few years, that when I did work for Disney and Disney America, I mean, everything was contracted and crystal cut clear. And I knew exactly, okay, my voice will be used on this ride or this part of, let's say, in Orlando, Florida, not Disneyland, but Disney World. And it'll be used on this ride, and it won't be used at Tokyo Disneyland, for example. So I knew exactly where my voice would be used on Disney, for example. And there was something about the Western way of being fair and honest to the narrator, that you knew exactly where you'd be used, where you'd be heard. And that part was great, because it didn't leave anything for anyone to question. This was your hard work. This was your job. And it was only in here. So if, let's say, I did a lot for Fuji Highland. I did a lot of commercials and a lot for their rides at Fuji Highland. And so Fuji Highland would say, okay, well, what have you done as far as your competitor? And I said, well, in Disney World, in Orlando, not Disneyland in California, for this ride, I did this narration. Or so they're like, okay, that's good then. So for our ride, which would say it was we did roller coaster rides for Fuji-Q Highland. There was about 6 or 7 different commercials, and then there was also the ride itself. At least they knew that it wasn't going to compete with what Disney World was doing. And so that part is important. And I think when you're in the business a long time, at the beginning it doesn't really make a difference, but the longer you're in the business, it can work for you, but can work against you. And I just want to know where it's being used and how long it's going to be used, and not abused. And unfortunately, it's not my situation solely. It's a lot of narrators. And as I mentioned, when you first asked this question, I would talk to, let's say, Patrick's agent or and other agents, and it's like, wow, unfortunately, this is the way that it was, and it kind of carried on, because Tokyo is a place that people come, they work, and then they leave. And I think that might give the Japanese, carte blanche to enter and say, listen, we're going to take this voice, and he's probably not here anymore. She's probably not here anymore. So we're going to use it here, 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 and here. And it's very hard, because then you want to be true and be honest to the client, because you want to keep working for them because you enjoy them or you enjoy what they're doing. But when there's some conflict later on, they say, wait a minute. No, you did a voice for another roller coaster ride or something. And then it's like, no, I didn't. And then it caused a bit of conflict and distrust. And And that's something that no one really wants. You kind of want things just to move smoothly and move forward. So I really want my fellow narrators just to keep, you know, to be, you know, credited, number one. And number two, I want them all to be able to know where their work is being used. And, you know, it's not just myself. I think a lot of narrators that I've known for, like I said, over 25 years, now they're getting very, very strict with contracts. And before, like I said, it was a good old handshake or a bow, I should say. And it was an understanding and agreement that this would not be abused. But this is now the Western way of contracts and of obligation to respect the artist's work must be there, unlike years ago.
Yeah, it's really disappointing to hear that's such a prevalent issue. You know, it is, like you say, the dark side of it. I think it's a bit upsetting to know that people get exploited in that way. Really quickly, I think the other day I saw you posted a Patreon for this. Is that correct?
Yeah, someone kept saying, you know, why don't you put up a Patreon to, you know, and I thought, why, you know, and they said, don't you have one? I was like, no. And then someone said, you know, there was a couple comments, and I thought, I don't know, I guess put on Patreon and it helps, you know. Now I found two of the other narrators, interesting enough. I mentioned this to Nick. My timing's a bit off here, maybe 6 or 9 months ago. Another lady in Germany, we were trying to find who this German narrator was, and who was this Italian narrator, and they really wanted to know because it was important for them because they were maybe 10 or 12 or 15 years old, and that was 20 years ago. They played the game so much that it became like a song that they remember from their childhood. So every time they heard that voice, it triggered some kind of emotion in them of nostalgia. And I never really thought of that before. And this last year and a half, this is probably the greatest lesson I've learned is nostalgia. I have nostalgia for certain songs that bring back memories or certain voices or certain tags on commercials. And I thought, wait a minute, we all do this. There are benchmarks in our life at that age or at that time or what we were thinking or what we were doing at that time. And we say, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, I remember that period. And we take that time in the past and we link it to a sound, a song, words, a game. And that nostalgia is what makes us understand, you know, how time goes so fast and what we were at that time and have we evolved, you know, 20 years later. And I never really realized that until, you know, I'm kind of overwhelmed that the most popular comment or the most, you know, a lot of emails, especially recently, too many emails and too many, you know, messages and everything. But I see that. I appreciate it, but I see the same message like, wow, you're a big part of my childhood. And I just want to thank you for that. And for me, that's very touching because, of course, at the time I did the job, I didn't have that in mind. And you know, things move on, things develop, and, you know, games change, they evolve. And I realize now, wait a minute, we all have benchmarks in life. We all have those certain sounds, songs, scents even, or anything that bring us back to a certain period of when we were maybe very happy or very sad or very, you know, one lady said that, you know, it was a very dark time in her life, very challenging. And she found, you know, some solitude and she found peace playing, you know, hearing my voice and she would say it with her sister and, you know, and their dad when he was alive would play it with them and they'd all say, you know, ready, go, or, you know, goal, and then all of these things. And it brought back memories to them. And for me at the time, it could have been considered an interesting job. But for other people, this was a benchmark in life. And the best example was this girl that had memories of playing this game endlessly with her sister and their father who had passed on. So that part has been probably the most beautiful part of this last 18 months was, wow, that had such a an effect on many people. And I never knew that. I never thought of it that way before. Then it kind of makes you reflect inside and look at yourself and think, wait a minute, we all have these sounds and these time frames in our life. The first high school dance, or graduation, or a time that that was important with your family, that family members were alive, and or it's difficult times or good times. But it was always something that marked a period in their past. And for me, this has been the greatest gift of these past 18 months, was knowing that, great, you know what, if anything you've done in life, I've learned that I've been able to touch these people and give them some memories, and hopefully good memories of their childhood from playing a game, which may not have seemed relevant for me at the time, but boy, is it relevant now. It's an honor to hear that it made people happy. It triggered happy memories of being together with people that they would play with, or childhood memories when things were innocent, or there was things were easier in life for them. And that's been the most touching part of this whole 18 months. That's been the greatest prize, the greatest feeling coming from this. And that kind of pushed away all of the negative thoughts of like, really, like, come on, guys, what are you doing now? And what's going on with the game? And why are you not respecting the narrators who, put their heart and soul? Because we put a lot of time in the studios, and, we really, one thing about the narrators that I worked with, we all gave 110%. Like, we never just went in there just to do a job. It was not a job. It was a passion. And, that part is wonderful. It's very, very touching to know that you were there, just like other people were there, have it be singers or narrators that I've heard from TV commercials or something in the past that are like their benchmarks. Oh, I remember that I was 10 years old. Oh, I remember that I was 20 years old and when I was 23 years old when I was in Australia. Oh, I remember that. And, it's simple as that. When I was in Australia, for example, Crocodile Dundee had come out that year. So I'm thinking it was like 84. And, no one ever really knew where Australia, no one went to Australia. It was just too far. And being there, and when Crocodile Dundee came out, so that's my benchmark. That's my feeling of, oh yes, I remember it. If you ask me when did Crocodile Dundee come out, the very first one, with Paul Hogan, it was like, oh yeah, I remember that one was when I was in Australia. And it was just so interesting at the time. So now I can understand that, and I can really respect it. And I feel honored that the way people have touched me with certain movies or certain sounds or songs or whatever, I could do the same for them. And it's the best part of all of this. So yeah, I'm happy about that.
I think that's a phenomenal thing to be ending on. I appreciate. Look, I think we will wrap it up because I've taken a lot of your time already. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with me, Brian. It's been absolutely amazing. I love listening to you talk. I could sit here and pick your brain forever, it feels like. The stories you have to tell are amazing, and I hope you continue to tell them whenever you get the chance. What I think I'll do is I'm actually going to put a link down in the description of this one, upload it to your Patreon, if that's okay with you, because I think it is worth to just put that out there. So anyone listening, go click on that, have a look at that, because I think it is a worthwhile thing to be bringing attention to. And if people wanted to keep up to date with you, where's the best place they can do that?
I think Instagram is fine. I would have liked to have done more videos, but non-disclosure agreement. I have to be careful what I say and what I do. So I would say that Instagram is probably still the best. Now that it's already been released, it was really difficult to keep things quiet for it was really, really difficult. And I thought, oh Lord, have I gone too far and stating something? And, because I remember one time I said to Nick, I said, don't do a live. It's not going to be, don't do it. It's not ready. It's not going to be presented. And I think at that time he was kind of expecting it to be presented as something that was live at the one. This is when Nagoshi was doing a live on YouTube, and I just said to him, please just wait. And these are things that take time. And I think when I look back now, it's like, wow, that was that long ago that happened, and it kind of, I didn't want people to not believe that things weren't in progress, but it was just a crazy, I don't have to tell anyone this, they already know the last 18 months as everyone's lives have changed dramatically. But I'm glad that people kind of were patient and are still patient. And I really hope that they get what they're looking for, or what they want, or have it be nostalgia for a game, or new players that I hope that they find, that this is something that they like, and something that they find interesting. I won't have to post much more on Instagram now because the cat's out of the bag, and let people do what they want to do with whatever information they have, and let's just see what happens in October, and how things are decided for each zone. And one last thing I will say, though, is, and this is 100% fact, that this wasn't going to even happen. This wasn't supposed to happen. And when Nick did this interview, I remember coming home from the studio that day, and Chris, a fellow narrator, said, listen, this guy wants to talk to you, and regarding this game and everything. I'm like, oh, okay. And I look back at the time period, and that was 18 months ago. And I can't believe over 18 months that at the beginning, there was nothing that was going to happen. And then it happened. This was in December 2019 that I spoke with Nick. And then the following year, things started to happen, and they would have never, ever, ever happened. They had no interest whatsoever in releasing any Monkey Ball anymore. Everything was all about Yakuza and other projects they were working on. But as far as Super Monkey Ball, it was finished. It was over. It was done. Nothing more was going to be released. They didn't see any value in it, and they didn't have any interest in it. And give credit where it's due. I think with Nick's video, and also everyone requesting another game, or come on, it's been a while, or they weren't happy with Banana Blitz or some of the other past games. They felt they fell short, and it's good to know that that through that, and kind of also we had a lot of talks and a lot of meetings, and with agents, without agents, just dealing with Sega to push it in that way. And I think all of that is what really made this happen. If none of that happened 18 months ago, we wouldn't be talking today about something that's going to be released on October 5th. It just would not have happened. That's one thing I can say with 100% certainty. There was nothing in the works at the time that I was talking to Nick. There was no interest, none whatsoever. And so it's amazing. That's why, any little thing that seems impossible, or you want to say no to, that's why you say yes to certain things, because you don't know what's going to happen. I personally didn't think that anything would come around either at that time. And it was just like, okay, here's a guy that seemed to have a fascination with Japan and had a fascination with Super Monkey Ball. So yeah, so gladly, I'll learn something too. Or I'll remember something that, I pushed to the back of my mind from, April 2000. And I will say, okay, great. Let's just do it, entertain him, and let him, whatever his fascination is, just, honor it and just hear him out. And that's exactly what I did. And it's funny how something just, a man that does YouTube, that, puts out these quality videos, how something that's such a niche and such a bizarre search for who is the main announcer for a game that was made 20 years ago. I mean, it's almost comical in a way. You say to yourself, wait a minute, who has any interest in reviving something from 20 years ago? And in that part, personally, I, for me, it was not an issue. It was like, if it happens, great. If it doesn't happen, that's okay. I mean, there's other things that I was really focusing on at the time. And when it all came together, it made me realize, wow, the impossible does happen, because this was the big impossible. There was no way this was going to come together. And a female narrator, a foreign lady that I worked with, she was on, and then unfortunately now they're not going to use her voice. But I really think that this would have never even come to surface without 18 months. So it made me also less cynical in the sense of being more of a believer that, geez, something like this spurred by one short interview with someone I've never met. I didn't meet Nick because he left Japan, and then right when he got back to America, that's when Chris called me, and I think he just got home like a day later or something like that. So we've never met. And it goes to show you that the power of YouTube and the power of social media now. This is the new way to put out ideas and to put out new products and new understandings of what is what people want. And the Japanese Sega, they had no inkling that this is what people wanted again. For them, this was done. This was finished. They moved on to Yakuza, and things kind of went murky for a while. With Sega's in Japan, they have a few centers set up for game centers, and then pre-COVID and then during COVID, this came up that they had to sell these, get rid of these because they couldn't keep them open, and it just things evolve, things move on. And but yet something from 20 years ago that I thought was irrelevant actually is very relevant now. And these are diehard fans, and to respect to respect them and all of their kindness and all of their interest. I really hope it meets their expectations. I really do. I really hope that they're happy with it. I hope that that things come together in the final editing and the final production for every region. I do hope that it does live up to the hype that's been made, and it's not going to be a disappointment like some past games have been. And so it's right.
I don't think that's going to happen.
We'll wait and see what happens. One thing I didn't want to do was I didn't want to build too much hype into it, because I thought, wait a minute, what if things, this happened before with a couple other of their games in the series. It was more of a cash cow game, and just put it out there and they'll buy it. And it's like, no, I mean, people weren't happy with the changes that were made and the quality of and the levels and just the lack of change or the lack of inspiration. It just seemed like they would just put a little bit of paint on some faded areas and then put out the product and just call it something different. And I thought, wait a minute, if this happens again, there's going to be people I can say right now that aren't not going to be happy with this. And there's going to be people that are going to be happy with this. You can't please everyone. But I think raising expectations prior is not the way I want to be, or it's not my job to be doing PR. I mean, that's the last thing I want to do. I think I only really did it because I just thought, well, if it's making, people happy, and if it's making, people excited about something during a very dark, part of all of our history, then great. But I do hope that it lives up to expectations, and it leads to other projects or other ideas. It does spin-offs on there's already been a couple of games that I've narrated that we've used some of the similar lines. And also they're very similar in the game itself. And I wish the new people that are coming up now with making these new games and making these new platforms, who put in years of hard work to make these, out in the market, because, not every market has to be monopolized by one game. I'm really happy to see that people who are putting music together, people who are putting, actual voices together and editing things, and people who are making the actual game themselves. The two projects that I did, it's like I was honored to be able to do those, because it's time for them to let them enjoy, and it's not always the same person who's benefiting. I want to see new people with startups, give them the chance to benefit and give them a key to the door.
Yeah. And look, Brian, I think no matter what the end result is for this game in October, I think all the people who have been so nostalgic about this for years, and I think especially Nick, everyone should just be happy to know that this was able to make a change and was able to turn, this company who didn't want to do anything, get them to actually do something. I think everyone can just be happy about that in a big way.
Yeah, I would agree. I would totally agree on that one. And I do hope that, the thing I want to see most out of this is personal young companies and upcoming companies do spin-offs, or take something from this, or take some ideas and make it relevant and make it their own and put it out there. Because I still see the field is still quite small. Gaming is, especially what we've seen in the last 18 months, has been a way of people keeping their sanity. And it was a way of people, forgetting what's going on around them. And it was just being put into another world. But I still feel the field is still too small. There's so much room to grow, and there's so much room for competition. And there's endless things that can be done. And I really hope that developers, new developers, this is the time that they enter the market in their lifetime. And, share the pie is big enough for everyone. So let's give everyone a piece and not just give for one. Because the stuff that I've seen already that have been, we'll call very similar or kind of spin-offs, have been very well done. And I'm really amazed that people could put such a production together. And it's not the same, but it is the same in a way. And it for me, that's been the most exciting part. It's stimulated people to take something, make it their own, and put it out there. Because there is room out in this whole world, especially with all the platforms we have now, to keep gamers happy. This is basically an addiction for people. They love gaming, and they want to be challenged. They want to be stimulated, and I want that to keep continuing. And I really hope this field expands even more. It's been too much of the same players for too long. So let's bring in new talent and let them have their chance in the spotlight and give them a chance to make something. And we're 20 years later now. So great. Then come on, guys. You're a production company. Bring it on. Let's do it. Like make your mark in this world. And now, if this gives any kind of stimulation or any kind of push for people to do that, then hey, great. To me, that's the greatest honor and the greatest merit that I can take from all of this.
I absolutely love that mindset. That is exactly right. I can't wait for, in the coming years to be able to see what's coming out of these places. It'll be really special, these new players.
Yeah, that's it. And what we're doing now, like I said, with the way that we have technology right now, it is possible. And I think this last 18 months, seeing what people, if they really sit down and they put their mind to it and they put it together, I'm like, wow, good for you. You've made a difficult time. You put that energy into something very positive and, something that could trigger someone else. So I just want to see a full domino effect. I don't want to see everything so controlled or just for the few. I want all those people, or, even what you're doing now. I wish you the best in your narration life. And I wish you the best in your productions and stuff. Give everyone a chance to have a piece of the pie. I mean, that's the way it should be. Everyone, we live in this great global, world now where we can communicate so easily, and we can do things that were in the past very difficult to do. But now we have the technology to do it. So go out there and do it and take advantage of it and make the most of it and be creative. And then you'll find this generation now can stimulate people for the next 20 years.
Well, look, Brian, I am going to let you go. Thank you again so much for sitting down with me. It's been absolutely wonderful. Frankly, I don't know how to end it other than that. Thank you for your time again. I really do wish you the best as well. I mean, I know you've got a lot of work at the moment. Like you said, living in quarantine master right now, back and forth. And I hope that goes well for you. And I'm hoping that, eventually, hopefully sometime soon, you'll be able to get back into the studio in a safe and productive manner.
Yep, everything always falls into place. So we've all survived 18 months so far. So I think we're all going to be fine moving forward. Through. Yeah, exactly. A few bumps in the road, but hey, that's what builds character.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Brian. You enjoy the rest of your evening, man.
My pleasure, and you enjoy your time. Okay, thank you so much, and good luck with everything. Bye-bye now.
Alrighty, thank you everyone who made it all the way to the end. I appreciate anyone who watched this so much. If you enjoyed that, then hang around. I'll be doing more of this. Don't know when, don't know who I'll be talking to, but I'll be doing my absolute best to get as many people behind the mic as I can, because everyone in this industry, I mean everyone in general, but everyone in this industry has absolutely phenomenal stories. Again, to be clear, this is going to be an interview, podcasty type show featuring voice actors. If you're wondering, am I going to bring other people on? Maybe, but probably not. That's not the goal. Voice acting's cool, man. It's cool. It's cool. I've already learnt a lot doing this one, so going forward, I think that the next ones can be even better, with far less annoying problems and far higher quality. So if you do enjoy it, stick around, look forward to that. And finally, I just want to say again, huge thank you to Brian Matt. He's absolutely amazing. It was so kind of him to give me his time. I'm absolutely no one. The fact that he was willing to sit down with me for as long as he did is absolutely amazing. Thank you, Brian. You're a legend.